Welcome to the Sooners 360 Recruiting Podcast, a podcast for OU recruiting fans by Sooners 360. Each week, we catch you up on the latest OU recruiting news and provide opinions and evaluations on all things OU football recruiting. I'm Chris Mason, lead recruiting analyst for Sooners 360. This podcast is now sponsored by Sooners 360 on Patreon. To support this podcast, please go to patreon.com, use the search feature, type in Sooners 360, no space, follow the search results, and click subscribe. It's only $2 a month. There's also a free trial option. Also, this podcast is part of the Believe podcast family. Every team, every topic, everywhere. And I'm also appearing Monday nights on the show Recruit Intel with Chris Griffin from the Horns Down podcast. That show goes on a little after 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 Central. And on Thursdays, I'm appearing on the show Sooner Intel, which, again, that show starts around 9:15 Eastern most of the time, maybe 9:30 occasionally. And my co-hosts of that are, again, Chris Griffin from the Horns Down podcast and Jason Watkins from the Hall of Fame College podcast. So to capture all of this content, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I know I keep mentioning that on all videos and all content, because if you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, it greatly helps me. Subscriber growth is crucial on YouTube for all of their algorithms. That's why you hear all content creators on YouTube talking about subscriber growth, whether you're as big as Josh Pate or as small as me. Those algorithms make my channel available to new viewers and helps me grow. So that's all the marketing spiel out the way. This is episode 168, Restacking the 2027 Offer Deck. So just a content update for you guys. The YouTube small format daily videos is going very well. So this podcast is, if you're watching the videos, I'm going to try and make sure that this podcast on YouTube is as content fresh as possible, not a rehash of the stuff you've watched during the week. So it's going to be just a recap summary. And, if you're just trying to catch up on everything with OU news, this is your place. I'm going to be doing more analysis and recruit videos in the daily stuff. So I'm also considering trying to do a small format audio podcast. So keep an eye out. That might come in the next week or two. I got to think about how I can juggle some of this stuff, with everything else going on. So commit news. There's nothing pressing, nothing going to break real soon, unless it's a decommit. So just a quick schedule reminder: the coaches are still out on the road. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But if you're on Twitter at all, Stacey Ford is in California. Jim Nagy and Brandon Hall were visiting Jalen Scott in Mobile. I'm sure Arbuckle is probably going to be visiting Jamison Roberts again, if he can. And Miguel Chavis and Stacey Ford were just at Uhila Wolfgram's family farm doing farm chores. So the coaches are out on the road. I believe Friday may be the final day. Maybe they can go somewhere this weekend. I'm not quite sure on that. But the 30 days is coming to a close. It started basically right after the week after the spring game on the 18th. So we're getting close to the end of it. And then after that, everybody has to come back to Norman and cannot be recruiting off campus. That being the case, OU doesn't have any visitors scheduled for this weekend. And maybe the coaches are either going to take maybe a quick vacation or get back to Norman and just kind of regroup for a week. OU has never traditionally used Memorial Day weekend for recruiting. Some programs do, OU won't. So that puts OU back on the recruiting, back into recruiting full swing on May 29th. They're going to have a big visit weekend. And of course, when you have 21 verbal commitments, a lot of the kids visiting will be verbals. But we're going to kind of go through the names here in a bit about where we think things are going, etc. Then OU probably will bring in some recruits June 5th, maybe some names they're just trying to quickly get on campus, some late offers, maybe using that weekend to make sure that fits, trying to get some kids to bump their schedules a little bit. We'll see some traffic probably on June 5th. Then on June 12th is another big scheduled recruiting weekend. Again, it'll be a large amount of verbal commitments, and then it'll be a certain amount of targets. Also, OU has their summer camp sessions will be going on, kind of split between May 29th and June 5th, and between June 5th and June 12th. So they'll be doing a lot of summer camp events, which will be focused on 2028 evaluations, 2029, and 2030. So that's kind of the schedule of events. So next week might be a little slow heading into Memorial Day. The following week, we're going to have a bunch of noise heading into the first recruiting weekend. And we're probably going to hear we're going to hear that some OU verbal commits are being pushed by other programs to come visit. So we're probably going to have some noise that direction. Maybe some targets will fall off verbally committing elsewhere. They might be visiting this weekend, next weekend, Memorial Day weekend. So before OU can get them on, maybe we'll lose some targets, or maybe some cancellations will occur. We'll get to those names in a little bit. First, I need to make a correction. This happens when I freewheel content and I don't write everything down. I mistakenly called California 2028 tight end, who OU just offered, a really good-looking prospect. I mistakenly called him Jalen Smith. I was afraid of that when I was doing the broadcast, so I fumbled his name. Double-checked the transcript, and I did. So his name is Jalen Smalls. My apologies to anybody from his family or connected to him if you listen to the podcast. I'm sorry about that. I didn't write his name down in my notes, and then when I got to it, I wanted to talk about him, and I just made a mistake. So sorry about that, guys. But I feel like anytime I make a mistake like that, especially with a name that big a miss, that it's appropriate for me to make a correction. So there we go. Jalen Smalls, 2028 California tight end. OU offer, lots of offers from lots of guys. An interesting name to track. Talking about people coming after OU verbals, the noise this week, and it sort of started from Chad Simmons, and it's gone around 247 and Rivals, is that Ohio State and UGA both went to go visit Jamison Roberts. UGA is waiting to hear from a 2027 quarterback. His last name is, I believe it's Bork, because I believe he's related to Ray Bork, the Boston Bruins Hall of Famer. So they're waiting on him. He was verbal to Michigan, decommitted during all of Michigan's best. And I think he's down to UGA and Vatek. If UGA gets him, they're out of the market, because they have a 5-star top 5 quarterback for 2028 already in the fold that they grabbed from IMG if they could hold on to him. So if they could get him, that will end that. If they miss out on him, his name's, I believe, Peter Bork or Borke. I'm not a Boston Bruins hockey fan, so if that name pronunciation is incorrect, but I seem to recall an old ESPN episode where he was called Ray Bork. So that's what I'm going with. So Ohio State's a completely different story. They have a 2027 QB commitment already, Brady Edmonds from California, but they've been out on the road apparently trying to drum up interest from a number of different quarterbacks, especially targeting Trey Taylor at Nebraska, who was a one-time OU target back when OU was looking at Trey Taylor or Peyton Houston. Back in that day, before all the other changes that occurred back in the summer of 24, to show you how long ago that was. So Ohio State is either shopping for another quarterback or wants to add 2 quarterbacks. depends upon which story you're getting from which person. So I think they're more of a threat than UGA just in general, but I don't see Jamison Roberts ditching OU to be the second Ohio State quarterback. Now, if Ohio State loses Brady Edmonds, and let's just say Brady Edmonds gets wind of this and decides, maybe I'm going to look around, goes to visit UCLA. UCLA opens up their bag of goodies that they apparently have, and he switches to UCLA, then Ohio State might be more of a threat. But it's something to monitor more than anything else. But again, as I talked about the calendar, things are starting to get compressed. He's going to be on campus soon for his OU official visit, and I think that's only with the rest of the verbals he's been friends with. I think that's only going to reinforce his ties to OU. And then once he makes that official visit, if he doesn't schedule another official visit, then we get into July and August dead periods, and then we're into the football season. So I don't see how Ohio State gets to Jamison Roberts in like the next 2 weeks, but we'll keep tracking that. We'll keep an eye on that story. So, all right. So I'm going to restack the offer deck here. We know OU sits at 21 verbals. I think I've been saying 22 incorrectly. I think I got confused with the whole Jackson Stokes decommit and then Sione Falila commit in the same sort of time frame. So they're at 21 commits, and the visit weekends are coming up. So I have 4 players that I'm categorizing for the Sooners as must-haves. And the first 2 are obvious. The second 2 need a little bit of an explanation. So the first one is Bodie Sparrow. He is visiting on May 29th with Crew Jones and a host of players that he has verbal commitments that he's been around and have been in contact with. He's the safety OU wants to get 2 safeties in this class. OU needs to rebuild safety depth a little bit after they're going to lose Peyton Bowen. Then Michael Boganowski will be a senior the following year, as will Reggie Powers. They lost Jaden Hardy. Marcus Wimberly went elsewhere. Nico Jandro had a good spring, but Markel Ford was banged up, so we're not quite sure where his development calendar is. So they definitely want to add some safeties in 2027, and Bodie Sparrow is the second safety they want to add. Then we have Gabriel Osborne, and I've checked all over the place, and I'm not for certain sure when his official visit for OU is, but it's either the 29th or the 12th. And obviously, OU's got to land him. He's becoming a Gerald McCoy, Reggie Smith, Jermaine Grisham type in-state recruit. They've got to land this guy. They've had a lead for a long time. Some programs are making a late run, including Ohio State, annoyingly again. But OU's got to land this kid. He's going to be an elite cornerback. You've got to keep the best kid in state, and in any other year, he would be the best kid. But obviously, OU already got Caden Penny and Cooper Hackett, and the 3 of those are basically a 5-star guys. You can argue over which one is really the best. So Gabriel Osborne is obviously a must-have. So that's the 2 must-haves when you think about roster needs. That gives you a 3rd cornerback in the class, and that gives you a 2nd safety in the class, padding the secondary numbers, which you need to do. And OU's definitely aggressively going for big numbers in the secondary. And the last 2 names that are must-haves are Ben Kolar and Case Alexander. Ben Kolar's doing a midweek visit, June 3rd, I think through the 5th. That's been reported on a number of different places. And then Case Alexander should be on campus, I believe, June 12th. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure. And those guys are must-haves this summer. Because if you don't get either of those kids, you don't have another tight end that has an official visit, and you don't have another linebacker that has an official visit. So you don't have anybody for those spots. So if you don't get them, you're going to have to reset recruiting at those 2 positions and decide which way do you want to go. Do you even try and add a 3rd linebacker? Do you even try and add a 2nd tight end? The 3rd linebacker, I can see both directions on that. The 2nd tight end, your tight end depth is in a very different place than it was 6 months, 8 months ago when Ben Kolar looked like a priority. I think he still is, and OU wants to land him. But you go into 2027 with Jack Van Dorselaer, Seneca Driver, Trinae Washington, who had a very productive spring at tight end, and that looks like that's going to work. And then you got Tyler Ruxer coming off redshirt, and you've got Ryder Mix, who should be healthy and ready to contribute, fall of 2027. So that's 5 bodies. So I'm not sure where OU will go. Do they kick that down? They kick it down the road until 2028 when, with Jason Witten getting lots of visits from high-end tight ends and looks like he could probably land 2 players. That's something to consider. So we'll have to see what OU decides or where they go if they miss out on Ben Kolar. And I think there's a possibility he ends up not at OU. And Case Alexander, we're in this sort of 50-50 Penn State VOU, family connections with the coaching staff versus the best place to play linebacker. So I don't think anybody has an idea where that's going to break. But that's the 4 must-haves. 2 that are just absolute roster must-haves. And then 2, you didn't get these kids. What are you going to do next? All right, then the next group I'm calling the wild cards. These are players that OU would like to have. They're not must-haves. They've got players at different positions here. But if OU gets these guys, it makes things more interesting overall. And the most interesting name that is a wild card for the Sooners is Gideon Gash. Other than a 5-star defensive tackle, other than the Brewster kid who's committed to Texas Tech, Jalen Brewster, Gideon Gash is the most intriguing piece you could add to the OU defense in this whole 27 recruiting class, because he could be an absolute all-American elite cheetah for the Sooners. So if OU can land him, his potential impact at OU is significant. Then the next wild card is TJ Lewis, the running back from Bolingbrook. And Gideon Gash is visiting June 12th. TJ Lewis, we don't have an official visit date yet. It sure seems like OU will get an official visit. And he would be the second power back in the class, give you a little bit of protection against Keldred Ben, perhaps taking some visits or maybe a late flip involved with him, although I don't really see that happening, but you never know. So TJ Lewis is a wild card because that would be, really Dalen McCullough's first running back recruit. So that would be interesting from that standpoint. Then the next 2 guys are defensive linemen. The first one is Yahila Wolfgram from Utah, the defensive end. He's a wild card because he would give you 3 defensive ends in the class. And I just saw a photo of him next to Miguel Chavis, and they're both in socks. And he sure looks like he's closer to 6'4", 6'4.5" than he is like 6'2" or 6'3", which is where I suspected he might be. So, and he's got a frame that can add some weight when you look at that picture. So, and he's got some serious potential there. So that's another wild card. I mean, if OU signed 2 defensive ends in the class, that would be fine. But if you added a third, that would certainly be an interesting part of this puzzle. And then Yaveen Zion has scheduled a visit for June 12th. That was reported by Parker Thune. And he's the wild card in terms of a long, big defensive end, already 260, could easily be a 3-tech, has some length and speed and twitch, a little bit like Grayson Holton coming out of high school. So he would be an interesting addition to the D tackle group. And it looks like Todd Bates is primarily recruiting him. And then last but not least, with an official visit date, I don't give the odds of him showing up as really high, would be Brian Swanson, the offensive tackle from South Oak Cliff, who camped at OU a couple of years ago, starred then, got his OU offer, Texas badly needs him. They're not doing well in state or nationally with offensive tackle recruiting. A&M has kind of put the boots to them for a couple of guys I thought they would have more impact in, and nationally they're not really landing anybody big. So Swanson's big for Texas, but if he makes that OU visit, things could get a little sneaky, and he would be an ideal sixth offensive lineman for OU because he's a tackle. He can play tackle. Can probably even play left tackle if need be, but can play right tackle. And he's athletic enough you can even play him. He can even play guard. He's big enough and athletic enough that you could move him inside too. So he checks all those boxes that Nagy wants in terms of position versatility. And then finishing touches. So if OU gets Gabriel Osborne, and Bodie Sparrow, you kind of want one more cornerback / safety kind of combo guy. And that the two names that have visits scheduled are Trenton Blaylock on the 12th and Bryce Williams, who I talked about last week from Florida. He's coming in May 29th. And there was a article mentioned on Rivals where they were it was 247, I think. Take that back. I think it was Rivals. Some of the names have flipped positions and all that, so it's a little harder to keep track. Where they were indicating OU's making a big push. So we'll see if he visits, and he may visit before Trenton Blaylock. When I looked at his film, I think Bryce Williams has corner safety potential. So he might check that box there when you've got Mikael McCreary, who could also has the potential to maybe play both as well. So we'll see. But either one of those guys, OU would like to add them for secondary depth. And then Corey Laga, who I talked about last week from Lamont, Illinois. Does he make an OU official visit? And if he does, I think things get interesting very quick there with him. He's an excellent left tackle prospect. If you could have Cooper Hackett, who is advancing on the way to being perhaps a contributor after a mentorship here behind Michael Fasusi, Corey Laga could come in behind Hackett, probably redshirt, and then you've got another development left tackle in your program. And the more O-line depth, the more tackle depth you can have, the better. So that's kind of a recap of the guys. And let me just check my numbers here. That's 12 names, and OU's not signing all of these kids. They're just not. So I don't know who falls off. If you ask me, I don't think they'll get Case Alexander. I kind of think if you were going to choose the OU linebacker path instead of the Penn State path, you probably would have committed before now. But we'll see. And Ben Kolar, I think, is a complete wild card. So I don't think there's a good chance Brian Swanson doesn't show up for his OU visit. And there's a good chance, Corey Laga decides that OU, that he likes the other schools that were with him a little bit longer and doesn't take an official visit to OU. So it's no way like I said, 12 of these guys end up as Sooners and we have 33 verbal commitments. That's not happening. So, but that's the resetting the deck. That's where we are. All right. Has OU made any more 2027 offers? They made one since we last talked. Monsana Turbot, who goes by the nickname Suki, is from Cincinnati, Ohio. He is a cornerback safety prospect, 6 foot, maybe 180 pounds, super athlete. He is an Indiana verbal, and he's the number 70 player in the nation, according to Rivals. Since that offer, I've heard nothing that indicates OU's getting a visit. This could be something, I guess, they could roll back to him in the fall if they need a spot, but I don't think – I'm not anticipating any more news here on this issue. So same thing with the Rawlings wide receiver they offered from Georgia. There's no indication that an OU visit is happening in June. So no news there right now. So do we expect any more new offers for 2027? I think it's doubtful that any more occur between now, May 14th. It's just crossed over midnight here in Atlanta, and May 29th. I doubt that anything happens. OU's not on the road, so they can't offer anybody in person. If you're looking for surprises from an official visit perspective, I think those would come from the existing offer group, that population. And I don't have a guess or even an intelligent guess on any surprises right now. So not expecting any. Again, 21 commitments and 12 guys that they probably will have scheduled on campus. There's not a lot of room for surprises at this point. So that's where 2027 stands. Let me give you guys an update on 2028. So here are the key offers that have been made recently. And OU's been on an offer binge, as I've described on multiple podcasts. And they've been on a 5-star binge lately. So they offered Teo Fano. He is from Utah. He is a 5-star, number 24 in the nation. And before you get too excited, he's like 6'4", 6'5", 250. Like I said, he's 18 months until he enrolls somewhere. Plenty of time from that weight. But he is a Utah legacy. His brother Spencer was just drafted in the first round. So I could see OU staying in this battle, but it's hard to imagine him not following in his brother's footsteps and going to Utah. Then, interestingly enough, OU offered the number 1 running back ranked right now, and that's Kevin Hartsfield from Georgia. He's 6 foot 205, and he's the number 23 player in the country. They offered DeAndre Biddens from Detroit. He's like 6'1", 180, just a rocket on film, elite looking speed. He's number 20 in the nation. Now Lamar Morgan is giving OU a little bit more of a Michigan presence, has some resources there. Dalen McCullough has probably recruited Michigan more. I've kind of mentioned that OU has a little bit more of an upper Midwest flair to their staff with contacts with Kevin Wilson, Dalen McCullough, Lamar Morgan. Gives OU a little bit more of a flair. Bill Beatenbaugh as well. A little more of an upper Midwest flair. So we'll see. Now a name that in a part of the country where OU does have some success and history is Cannon Zubak is a 6'7", 260-pound offensive tackle from Shawnee Mission East in the KC Overland Park area. He's number 20 in the nation. And his high school coach is Mark Simino, who was a All-American linebacker under Brent Venables at K-State. So guessing there's a little bit of a connection there. Then they offered Nasir Richardson, the number 2, I think he's the number 1 cornerback in the country. Sorry, he's number 2. The guy they offered previously, Amir Sears. It depends. One site's listing Sears as an athlete, another one's listing him as a cornerback. But Nasir Rogers is a 5-star. He's from Newark, New Jersey. He's the number 12 player in the nation. And I don't know if OU is going to pull him from New Jersey or even has any pull there. Then we have another cornerback from New Jersey who's now at IMG, Phoenix Evans, who's like 5'11", 170 pounds. He's number 52 in the nation. Then we have OU going back to Utah and offering Dennis 201, kind of an athlete. On film, I think he's probably better at receiver than DB, but again, it's his sophomore film. It's hard to tell. He's 6'1", 185 pounds, and he's from Provo, Utah. Then OU offered from Louisville, Graydon Reed. He's a cornerback, 6'2", 180 pounds. Bates was in Louisville recruiting Kellen Hall, and while he was there, he visited, and they made an offer to Graydon Reed in person. So he's number 85 in the country, according to Rivals. And I'm giving you a number based upon their highest ranking between On3 or 247, because the composite doesn't make sense right now. The 2028 rankings are all over the place, and we still don't have any ESPN rankings. And then Stacey Ford has been doing his usual West Coast job on the West Coast, and OU made 2 offers at Bishop Gorman. Defensive lineman Tuwan Lawrence, who's 6'4", 260, ranked number 62 in the nation. And then they offered Jamari Turner, who looks like he's an interior offensive lineman at 6'3", 320, and he's ranked at 193. So that's the majority of the 2028 offers that have happened since the last time we spoke. There's a couple names I probably missed, but those are the highest ranked guys, or the guys that have rankings right now. Because OU's offering guys that don't have rankings, because that's how nascent the 2028 rankings are. One other note to kind of end this podcast. So OU made a 2029 QB offer, which they haven't done in a very long time. Well, I mean, this is as early as I can remember OU offering a quarterback, seriously. And his name is Logan Lucero. He is 6'2", 6'3", 210 pounds, from Parish Episcopal School in Dallas. He just finished his freshman year. I believe they won a state title, if I remember from his highlights. And he threw for over 2,400 yards and had 27 touchdowns. I watched his film, and it's, for a freshman, it's very good. But there's a lot of one read, predetermined throws, sort of RPO stuff, very similar to what we see from Texas quarterbacks in the past. So we'll be interested to see his sophomore film. Wonder if perhaps this offer was an enticement to get him to come up and camp in Norman, so that OU could see him in person, see him throw, see how coachable he is, and start to get their dossier on him in terms of whether they want him to be the quarterback for 2029 or not. All right, so that's 32 minutes of news. I've tried to make sure this wasn't redundant for anybody who's watching the daily videos. I really appreciate the audience we're getting there. I hope you're liking that format. The feedback I'm getting is yes. If not, if you've got suggestions for me, please feel free to tweet me whenever, if you follow me on Twitter, just reply to any of the tweets I'm putting out when the new episodes are getting posted. Appreciate all that. If you're on an audio platform, please make sure you subscribe to this podcast. This podcast is not going away. Still plan on doing it. Please leave a rating. Please tell your friends to listen to the audio podcast if they're looking for audio content. And one last appeal, please visit patreon.com. Use the search feature, type in Sooners 360. It'll take you to the landing page for the Patreon site. You have the ability to subscribe from there. Again, it's only $2. There's also a free trial option. And that Patreon covers my costs for producing and publishing this podcast, So it keeps the podcast free. So it's the more money I can get from the Patreon, the less I'll have to consider putting this podcast behind a paywall. So if you enjoy listening to this podcast for free, consider giving me a try on Patreon. That's where my regular recruiting content gets posted. You get a lot of information before it goes to any of the pods. So I'll be back next week with another episode. Everybody enjoy your weekend.